have our next speaker, but before we do, just to break it up a bit, I did give a call out to Claire Reckless, who was up on this stage and went on to do a talk at a conference, and her journey is quite phenomenal. But there is someone else I'd like to call out just to break it up. Jem Hill, do you want to stand up and just make everybody aware of who you are? So that's Jem Hill. Jem Hill is brilliant because she came to Liverpool Tester Gathering. She supported us as well as the Manchester Tester Gathering, the Leeds Tester Gathering. And she does an amazing thing. She does a podcast every 2 weeks. Now, if anybody's done podcasts, it's bloody hard to churn them out at that rate. But she's doing it for the community, and now she's got like some top names going to her. So if you do want to listen to some really cool podcasts, it's called Let's Talk Test Baby. Let's talk about it. Yeah, I know I've been on it. Christ. I know I've been on it twice. The alcohol's pickled the brains. Okay, so round of applause for Jem Hill. So, we're on to our last speaker. Oh God, I'm looking forward to this. Okay, so sorry, Matt. You might want to come down the front a bit just and lean up against the wooden bit. Right, so first photo. This is Matt Parker. And this is Matt Parker in his other job, in The Walking Dead. It is you, isn't it? Does anybody else think that? When I showed this to someone last night, they just went, he looks nothing like him. And I was like, no, they're identical. Okay, so this is Matt Parker taking photos of shit. And just to reaffirm that, here's your first ever photo from your Twitter account. Does anybody want to take a stab at what it is? It's Liverpool Tester Gathering. It's me. Look, he's stalking me. So I stalked you, my friend. Right, so Matt is a Stoke fan. Let's not hold that against him. But here is a picture of... Right, this was taken in Stoke, no word of a lie, it was taken 12 years ago with a phone camera. I took this in a nightclub in Stoke, and this is what we're up against, guys. Mommy says I'm special. And then people from Stoke play the victim, don't they? When we start saying, you're a little bit crazy, man. I'm only joking, man. Right, so, next round of applause for the next micro talk. Let's give a supportive 10 minutes to Matt Parker! Actually, you should have called it testing tackle instead of testing tackled. It would have been funnier. Okay, I'll get off the stage now. I'm glad someone got me joke. Bloody hell, I'm giving up.
Right, so when I was asked to do a talk, I had to figure out what I was going to be talking about. Very much like Robin. As a first talk, I wanted to keep it simple. Now, I've been in testing for 15 years, and the thing that stood out in my mind was that I've had a lot of things said to me across the course of those 15 years. Lots of things made sense, but there were lots of things that didn't really make an awful lot of sense to me. Not only did they not make sense, they made me feel like the other person didn't really understand what they were talking about fully. Now, this is all a game of opinion, so I'm not going to say that anybody's right or wrong in this. I'm not going to say who said any of this or what company I was at, but I'm going to run through a series of quotes that I've had across the years that are all related to testing. What I'll do is I'll try and give some context as well, because quotes are easy to take out of context, so I'll try and give the context to the quotes as I go through it. Right, so this was the first one. The emojis are trying to give you an indication of how I felt when I was on the end of this quote. So if we tell developers what we're going to test, they will preempt the testing and make sure it works. Now, there was a pause there. In the actual quote, there was a pause there, and it came off the back of me asking a question. Why don't we speak to the developers beforehand and work with the developers on putting in some testing into the development function? This was the response. My confused face at the end of works probably prompted him to carry on and add the final sentence. Then we won't know how good the development quality is. Two things that stood out here, really. Number one, yes, it's a great idea to work with developers and help them to improve their testing. Working together is a really good idea. Now, the final line really makes me think that this is a company that are not giving any kind of ownership to the teams. They are very much distracted by stats and how good a job somebody's doing, as opposed to letting people work together to improve each other. So ultimately, this was slightly confusing for me. I told you there was more shit. We aren't happy with the quality of the builds handed over to test, so we're going to group the stories up into epics and deliver to test less often. Now, to be fair to the person who said this to me, it was a dev lead, and he wasn't happy about it either. This had come from the top. He'd been asked to pass this message on. But the context to this was we were finding a lot of issues, there was a lot of crossover of development, people breaking each other's code, and that resulted in a lot of issues out the back end. Their answer to this was, let's try and spend longer trying to make sure it's right. There was no solution to try and improve the code. There was just let's do it less often so we've got more time to make sure it's right. It didn't involve tests getting involved with developers or anything like that. It was just pure and simple, let's do it less often. Now for me, if you want to improve something, you do it more often, not less often. And you identify the problems and you target those problems. This one was an interesting one, and I genuinely did slap my head when I was asked this question. So, the same dev lead as the previous quote came up to me one day to ask me are the developers allowed to use Selenium, or can it only be used by the automation team? Now, this gave me two problems. Number one, clearly we were working so separately. We've got these teams working distinctly separately, and that's causing divisions. The fact that a developer feels like they don't have the confidence to use a tool that will help them do their job better is a worrying thing. Okay, so this one was possibly one of the most demotivating statements that I've ever had. So this was a test manager, my test manager at the time as well, which was worrying. So essentially, I was asking a simple question. We'd not had any retros. We'd not talked about what we could improve, what was going bad, what was going well. So I asked the question, can we do some kind of retro at the end of the next sprint? So it seemed like a simple question. I'd done it before in previous roles. And this was the quote: well, we don't need to waste time on retros. We've already sat down as a management team, reviewed the last sprint. We know what changes we want to make to the next sprint. So the worrying thing for me in this is that they were using metrics, they were using distance-based information to make these decisions. They weren't working closely with the teams. So all of the changes that they wanted to make were based purely on metrics and on frustrated conversations and frustrated information coming out of those teams. None of it was based on working in the teams and actually understanding the challenges and the problems that they were having. So this may or may not be me, but this was off the back of a discussion with a senior tester. So a load of developers had got frustrated that there was things that we were raising that weren't mentioned in the acceptance criteria in the stories, hadn't been discussed at all. And why were we raising these things? Well, we're not here to run through a checklist. We're here to actually try and identify problems in the software. We're trying to identify problems in the delivery. we're there to make the product better. Now, if we're stuck with working with acceptance criteria that is already flawed, then how do we actually make the product better? We're then restricted to that acceptance criteria. So, suffice to say, I carried on raising defects that weren't in the acceptance criteria and had numerous conversations similar to this. Now, this is the final one. This really did scare me a little bit because this was coming from the CTO at the company I was at. This was a direct quote from the CTO to me when I was head of test. We'd been going through a journey of trying to bring agile in. We were spending a lot of time trying to build tests into the code, trying to get regular builds out and test it on a regular cycle. And suddenly we had this change of CTO, and he came in from Capita, and his answer to the quality issues that we were having was, why don't we just try and let the developers do their job, make sure it's right, and chuck it over the fence to you? Well, that means that every problem that we identify right at the start of the cycle doesn't get pulled out right at the end of that cycle. It's not a production line. It's not the same as producing a car. Anybody who tells you it is lying. Essentially, this was the conversation that led to me leaving that company. This is the moment that I realized this is the wrong company for me. So yeah, that's all that I've got. These are all genuine quotes. None of these are things that I've made up. These are all things that I've been told in my career. And hopefully you've got some affiliation with these kind of things. If you need to get in touch with me, or you want to ask me any questions, there's my email, web, and Twitter. Thank you.
Any questions for Matt? Oh, one over there, stay there. Get the mic over.
Okay, so does this mean you will never go and work for an old school company using the old, instead companies are adopting the open DevOps practice culture?
No, is the simple answer. So my frustration and the reason that this tipped me over the edge and made me want to leave was because we'd been on a journey prior to that. We were moving in a direction that everybody was encouraged by, everybody was engaged in, and everybody felt empowered in. To try and feed that kind of information back to my team was a really challenging thing to do. To try and explain to them why this journey that we'd been on was coming to an end was frustrating. And I kind of felt like I'd taken that as far as I could. Now, I would definitely go into another company like that if in the right circumstances, because you can learn from bad experiences as much as you can learn from good experiences. So yes, I would, but I would always be looking for the right culture where I can.
Okay, what we'll do, guys, if you've got any more questions from Matt, he's going to be at the bar afterwards, or are you shooting up?
No, I'll be drunk at the bar.
So you can catch Matt straight after. But in the interest of time, we are going to move on. So can we have a round of applause, please, for Matt?
That was great, mate. So, what I do want to go back to is that one. No. That right. So, the reason this is really important is at the end of the day, regardless what your role is in the room, we're all involved in creating software, right? But at the end of the day, the users don't give a flying monkeys about what the acceptance criteria says. And I'll give you an example. Who's got kids in the room? Keep your hands up if you've given your kids at some point a tablet or a mobile phone. Okay, so this is what happened on Christmas Day when you gave them that tablet. They unwrapped the tablet and they went, "Oh, Daddy, thank you, you've got me a Samsung tablet. Thank God you didn't get me one of those Apple fucking things." So they open it, right, and they go, "Yeah," and they turn it on. And at that point, as a responsible parent, you step in, don't you, and you took that tablet off them and handed them the Samsung user manual. No, you didn't. Because at the end of the day, the kids don't want to read a user manual, they shouldn't have to, and that's why that's bollocks. Okay, so, and that's why I totally support what Matt said there. Okay, so what we're doing now? Oh, we're not going to have a break, we're going to quickly go into lightning talks. So, does anybody want to come up and do a flash talk or a lightning talk for 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes? Microphone's yours, the floor's yours, something you want to say, maybe you've heard something tonight that's invoked a bit of passion or a thought. Anyone? Please, someone. Please, pretty please. Okay, let's move on. Right, so that's the end of the night. It's a case of now going forth and doing epic shit. But before we do, we've got a big announcement. We do this every single event we do this. Now, I promised you at the end of the last event, we'd come to you with a big announcement. And guess what? We had a chat in the pub, and we haven't really got one. But what we do want, right, what we do want, and I'm asking Duncan, Phil, and Chris to watch the show of hands here. We're going to do a poll in the row. I'm going to ask you 3 questions, and I just want you to put your hand up at the right time. So, if we were to put on an agile meetup in Liverpool, who would come? Okay. If we were to change our name from Liverpool Tester Gathering to Liverpool Agile Meetup, Liverpool Agile Testing Meetup, who would still come? Okay. Okay. If we put on an Agile conference in Liverpool, who would come? Okay. Therein ends the experiment. It's time to say thank you to our 4 speakers, James, Robin, Matt and Ian. It's time to say thank you to the Avenue HQ guys who've looked after us all night. Woo! It's time to say thank you to our sponsors, Money Supermarket. It's time to say thank you to everyone else. I've forgotten. Right, yeah, cool. I can't say thank you to the flashers because not one of you got up and did a flash talk. Okay, guys, we're going to be at the bar. You can still come and get in touch with us. We are going to ask the 4 speakers to come to the front now so we can get a nice photo with a nice background so we can put it up on our Twitter page and you can promote it as well for your talks going forward. So go forth, do epic shit, and thank you for coming!